All right, let's jump straight into this explainer, breaking down the intense psychological journey of Ponyboy and Johnny in Chapter 5. We're totally stepping away from the immediate chaotic action of the murder in the park and entering a completely different kind of tension. Honestly, this is a deep dive into what happens when the adrenaline finally crashes and two teenagers are just left alone in the quiet to process what they've done. We're going to examine this intense shared trauma, their paralyzing fear of the law, and specifically the crushing weight of guilt from Johnny's perspective. We're dropping right into the chilling, emotional core of this chapter with Johnny's visceral, horrifying realization there sure is a lot of blood in people. I mean, wow, that isn't a hardened criminal speaking, you know? That's a terrified kid who just experienced something completely, fundamentally beyond his comprehension. The physical and emotional reality of taking a life is setting in, and man, it is incredibly heavy. Phase 1, the shock of isolation. Let's see how this terror actually builds, starting with the reality of waking up as fugitives in a freezing, abandoned church. Seriously, I want you to put yourselves in the shoes of these kids for a second. Imagine being surrounded by absolutely nothing but dead leaves and a creeping, overwhelming panic. Ponyboy wakes up on this hard, freezing rock floor, just listening to the wind howling through the trees. And for a brief second, he plays this mental trick on himself, right? He pretends he's safely back home with Derry cooking breakfast and soda pop ready to wrestle. But the illusion fades. The silence of that abandoned church on Jay Mountain is utterly deafening. And since he hasn't seen Johnny yet, Ponyboy's imagination just goes completely off the rails, jumping to the absolute worst-case scenario. He's sweating, he's trembling, his head is totally swimming as the delayed shock kicks in. Their fear of the authorities isn't just about getting like a slap on the wrist. In Ponyboy's mind, it's literally life or death, ending in the electric chair. This intense, isolated fear of the law is the crucible that's going to force these two boys to rely entirely on each other just to survive. Phase 2, stripping the greaser identity. Now, what's really fascinating about this next part is how a seemingly simple change in appearance becomes a massive psychological blow. So Johnny comes back with supplies and the horrifying realization that their physical descriptions are actually in the newspaper. He announces a plan that just strikes Ponyboy right to his core. Johnny brought back a week's supply of bologna, matches, and a copy of Gone with the Wind, which is great, but he also brings peroxide and a knife. They have to cut their hair, and Ponyboy has to bleach his. Ponyboy's immediate reaction, his hand flying defensively to his head, shows just how devastating this is to him. It's a total, ruthless dismantling of who he believes he is. For a greaser, we know this isn't just a haircut. Since they can't afford Corvairs or Madras shirts like the Sox can, their long, silky hair is literally their only source of pride. Cutting it physically strips them of their identity in order to break them. Ponyboy explicitly states that their hair labels them greasers. It's their trademark. Johnny even points out that the very first thing a judge does is make you get a haircut. It's a system designed to take away the one single thing these boys actually own. So sitting there with these bleached, scattered tufts of hair, Ponyboy isn't just freezing cold. He feels totally exposed and entirely disconnected from who he is. He looks in a cracked mirror and thinks he looks younger and scared. He even says he looks like a blasted pansy. They're both shivering there in the cold sunlight, suddenly realizing they don't even look like themselves anymore. The haircut basically becomes this stark physical manifestation of their complete loss of control. Phase 3, processing Johnny's deep guilt. We're going to shift our focus entirely to Johnny now, as the frantic adrenaline of the night before finally completely wears off. Johnny's agonizing breakdown over ending the life of a 17-year-old kid is the devastating emotional anchor of this explainer. While Ponyboy is mourning his hair and feeling super homesick for his brothers, Johnny snaps. From his perspective, he isn't just hiding. He is completely trapped in a mental prison of his own making. He reflects agonizingly on the undeniable fact that he ended a life. He didn't mean to do it. He was terrified they were drowning Ponyboy. But the guilt, it's absolute agony. You can practically see the physical toll this trauma takes on him. It's heart-wrenching. He paces and cries, slapping his pockets in the fading light. But here's the thing. His deepest guilt isn't even for himself. It's the unbearable weight of dragging 14-year-old Ponyboy into this absolute nightmare. He calls it his fault for bringing a 13-year-old along, but Ponyboy screams back, "I'm 14 and I'm in it as much as you are." This deeply shared vulnerability is where their bond fundamentally solidifies. They eventually just lean against each other and cry until they literally fall asleep. Phase 4, bonding through shared trauma. Cut off from the entire rest of the world, this intense emotional fallout forces the boys to rely solely on each other, forging a totally unique bond in the dark. They're killing time reading Gone with the Wind, right? And Johnny connects the gallant Southern gentleman to Dally, of all people, calmly taking the fall for Two-Bits' crime. Johnny might be a bit slow to grasp schoolwork, but he deeply, intuitively understands concepts like loyalty and bravery. He recalls seeing Dally get picked up by the police for breaking school windows Two-Bit actually broke, and Dally just took the sentence without batting an eye. Through Johnny's eyes, fixating on Dally's defiance is basically a coping mechanism to manage his own paralyzing fear of the consequences awaiting them. Then we get this quiet, incredible moment of reflection. Sharing a golden, misty sunrise prompts Ponyboy to recite Robert Frost. They wake up early one morning and just watch the mist in the valley turn gold and pink under the rising sun. Johnny whispers that he wishes it could stay like that all the time. This prompts Ponyboy to recite the poem, "Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold." It's just a profoundly beautiful moment of reflection on innocence and how fleeting beauty truly is. And this really proves that underneath all that tough greaser armor, these two share a sensitive, genuinely observant nature that the rest of their gang just doesn't dig. Johnny realizes he never even really noticed colors in clouds until Ponyboy pointed them out, and Ponyboy admits he could never recite poetry around the rest of the gang. In this isolated church, totally stripped of their gang identities, their shared fear transforms into an incredibly deep emotional bond based on real mutual understanding. Phase 5, a jolt back to reality. But, as the poem says, nothing gold can stay, and their isolated, reflective little bubble is about to be violently popped. Fast forward through 5 monotonous, sickening days of eating nothing but bologna and chain-smoking camels, the boys are suddenly jolted by a familiar, long, low whistle. By day 5, Ponyboy owes Johnny $150 in poker, he's read all the way up to the Siege of Atlanta, and he is physically sick from smoking on an empty stomach. He honestly feels like he's been transplanted right into the Civil War. And then, a toe nudges him in the ribs. Dally Winston crashes in like an absolute hurricane, bringing their very first contact with the outside world, plus a heartbreaking misspelled letter from Soda Pop. Dolly brings them out of their dream state instantly. He's been driving Buck's T-Bird and managed to trick the police into heading toward Texas. But the most impactful thing he hands over is that letter, which reveals Derry is nearly going nuts with frantic grief, completely shattering Ponyboy's earlier belief that Derry just didn't care about him. Over some barbecue sandwiches at Dairy Queen, Dally just rapidly unloads the chaotic, violent reality of the city that has totally erupted in their absence. The death of the sock in the park didn't make things quieter. No, it ignited a literal powder keg. It is now all-out warfare all over the city. Dally is walking around with an unloaded gun just to bluff his way through the streets. A massive rumble is scheduled for the very next night, and the Greasers actually have a spy helping them out, Cherry Valance. For Johnny, all of this perfectly validates his deepest fears. His single action has plunged their entire world into violent chaos. So as we wrap up this explainer and the boys prepare to hurtle back toward the city at 85 miles an hour, we really have to ask if their lost innocence can ever be recovered. They are returning to a world that has been forever changed by their actions. They've bonded through sheer terror, lost their pride alongside their hair, and stared down truly crushing guilt. The question isn't just what will happen to them next, but rather, after everything they've processed in that church, who are they now? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.